Hello everyone. So I wanted to make a guide about recasting and as well throwing in some important gear tips along the way. So if you're confused about what stats you should be taking, how you should go about recasting, should you save your materials, hopefully by the end of today's video you'll have a full understanding of how the system works and how you should be approaching it. So stick around and let's see while we break this system down bit by bit. And of course I'm going to start with the basics and then slowly work through towards some more advanced tips and understanding the best practices when it comes to the game. So starting off, let's talk about the very basics. What is recasting? How do I recast? How do I get materials for it, etc. So recasting is the act of going to your gear here and then clicking the recast menu, and then you have this menu. Now what recasting is, it allows you to re-roll these random stats on your gear. Now every single piece of gear has a different pool of stats that can be recasted. For example, if I click on the chest piece and go to recast, you can press the plus icon here and it'll show you a pool of the available recast stats on this piece, as well as the upper and lower bounds that are possible. There is also on the weapon, for example, if I go here, you'll see this is all offensive stats. So you have some pieces that allow you to recast to offensive stats, some that allow you to recast to defensive stats, and then some, like for example your greaves here, which allow you to recast to both. So actually getting recasts on certain pieces that have both defensive and offensive stats is more challenging because you have a bigger pool of stats to choose from. So the stats that have both offensive and defensive stats in the pool are your greaves. I think as well your ring is offensive. Necklace as well is a mix of both offensive and defensive stats, so that's going to be another difficult one to recast. This is all defense, just double checking. Boots are all defense. Gloves is all offense. And I think helm is another mixed one. Yeah, so your mixed pieces are helmet, greaves, and your necklace. So necklace, helmet, and greaves are going to be more difficult to recast than the rest of the gear because you're attempting to recast from a pool of stats that includes both offensive and defensive stats. So just keep that in mind, that it is going to be more challenging to hit your desired rolls in these bigger pools. So how does a recast work? So you click on an item, you click recast, and you press the recast button. When you do, you're going to have a button keep or replace stats. The keep is that you keep these stats at the top here. And if you like what the recast has given you, then you press replace stats. Now, I'm being very careful not to press replace stats here since I'm rolling this on a 555, but there you have it. Now, when you press recast, you are rolling two things. Number one, you're rolling the stats on all three lines, and then additionally, you're rolling what level each of the lines is at. So you could re-roll and say, for example, boom, I've got a level 2 mastery, a level 4 accuracy, and a level 1 crit. Keep that. Recast that. Okay, 4 crit, 3 mastery, 3 haste, 1 mastery. So as you see, it is a double layer of RNG. You have RNG on getting the right stats, and you have RNG on it being a high level. So with that in mind, that is how the recast system works, and that is at its core. Now, the materials used for recasting is number one, gold, which you collect through many different means in game, and the second is this material here called raw material. Now, the number one way of acquiring raw material is by smelting gear. You can also get it from the dragon bounty, and as well, there's 3 stores you can purchase raw materials, but to be honest with you, unless you're in like an emergency situation where you're like desperate and you need to recast something you've just messed up, generally speaking, I would buy the raw materials from the guild service area. If you have a surplus of leaves in the guild shop, I would buy them from the rift supplies very, very infrequently, only if you're in real trouble, like I said, and you have to recast to fix something because your party is running a trial, for example. Not a top priority at all from rift supplies. And again, from the hamster goods, I'll show you that here. So here you can buy the raw materials here for gold, and then here again for stellarite. In rift supplies, there's a limited quantity here, but it's 100 tickets, and to be honest, it's probably not worth it unless you're in a real trouble situation, like I said. And then the last place is in the guild shop in the service area. There's many here. So raw materials, I haven't bought them, raw materials, etc. raw materials. And again, if you have a surplus of these leaves and you've already bought everything you need, then there's nothing wrong with you know, grabbing a few of those in a situation. But that's not the main way of getting them. The main way of getting these raw materials is from, like it said, smelting gear. So smelting gear, if you go to equip, you have the bottom left smelt button. Now, it is a good piece of advice when you start early off in the game to press this auto button. And I would say in the very, very, very early levels, like, don't use this. Like maybe in the first 20 levels, if you're just playing actively and leveling up quickly, don't set auto smelt. But when you start to have mostly epic gear on, then you can basically say like this: I'm going to set auto smelt on basic, normal, and rare. And then once you start farming rifts and getting set pieces, then you can just have all 4 selected, and that way as your character is running through journey and getting gear drops, it doesn't just fill up your inventory all the way to the max. You're going to automatically smelt those gears, and every time you log in, you're going to see your raw material value being a higher value than it was before. So that's a good way to basically smelt all the gear that you don't need. And as you get further and further into the game, the one thing I will tell you is to be careful about smelting your set pieces, because there are, for example, some things you can do. I made a video about it, about energy, for example, how even though I'm running full icicle gear, 4 set icicle gear, I am still running 2-piece energy because of, number 1, the legendary set effect plus the set effect here for increased attack. Now, I do have it on good authority, and you can see it here if I go to camp. I'm going to throw in some gear tips along the way, since recasting is just like a general guide to gear as well. You have here the ability, when you have this set, you run 2 set energy, helm and gloves. Then from icicle, you'll run greaves and boots. And then from terror, you'll run blade and chest piece. So in theory, you could run 2 energy, 2 icicle, 2 terror. So that's just something, for example, to just be very, very careful. Do not automatically smelt all your old gear, your old set gear. Just be very selective. For example, like once you get once you're like T10, when you're fully maxed, like T15 I think it is right now, yeah. So once you're like fully maxed on your boots here, your T15 boots, and you have 7 extra boots, icicle boots here, and you're already T15, you can smelt those boots, for example. That's the only time that I would say it's okay to start smelting set pieces. Otherwise, be very careful and just make sure you don't accidentally smelt something that is useful to you. So that's that. Now, while we're on the subject of gear in general, I just want to give some more advice, like for example about gear upgrading while we're in the subject of recasting. The best way to upgrade gear in the early levels as well is to upgrade evenly until you have 600 gear level, which would be like around level 67 on all pieces, because that's the requirement for class change 1. So anyway, let's move on now to the best way to choose what stats on the recasting. Now, the thing you have to understand about recasting is it is a significant contributor to your character's stat value. So if you click here and you see crit, determination, haste, mastery, etc., all these stats are not primarily, but one of the major sources of these stats is from your recasting. So if I say, for example, here, this gives me haste, attack, and crit. So I have 160 crit from this piece. Let me look at my crit rate here. 36%. I'm going to unequip. Oh, no, I can't unequip. Well, let's see what I can change here. Sorry, I'm silly. Let me see if I can change it to something without crit rate on it. Here, okay. So this is a lesser icicle dagger. It doesn't have crit rate on it. I'm going to equip that instead. And my crit rate has gone from 36 to 33. So I lost 3% crit from 1 level 5 crit on this weapon here. So you can see that these stats do contribute directly to your stats here. Now, with regards to how you should be recasting, there is one thing I want to give, which is important advice. Now, I would not waste too many raw materials pre-class change 1. Ideally speaking, if you're in the base class and you are looking for how much you should be recasting, you're going to be swapping gears so quickly from level to level to level that I would not recommend blasting all your raw material. Ideally, how you should approach it is you should recast until you get the right stats that you're looking for, and level 3 and above on all of them is probably just fine. Now, if you get to a block where you literally just can't progress, then it's okay to spam it a bit more to try to get level 4s and level 5s. But generally speaking, pre-class change, you don't want to fully abuse the recasting system and blowing all your raw materials. You're going to then reach class change 1 with much better icicle gear, which can also once you reach Icicle Gear, you can start rolling Determination, which is an extremely important DPS stat. So do keep that in mind. In the early game, when you're still rolling Energy Gear, I would go light on using the raw materials just to the point that you get the stats you're looking for, and then save as much as you can for class change 1. Not, like I said, not to the point that you're stuck and can't progress because you're afraid to recast your gear, but if you can have like 400 or 500k or something like that saved up for class change 1, you'll be in really good shape to start recasting. The reason for this is in the early game, you're unlocking the next tiers of rifts very, very quickly, and as the game gets progressively more advanced, the time duration between unlocking rifts is expanding and growing bigger. So you're actually going to reach a point where it's going to take multiple days, maybe even at some point a week, before you unlock the next rift. Sometimes in pre-class change, you'll unlock your next rift in the same day. So you just spend all your recasting materials, and then at midnight you unlock the next rift, and you're like, well, great. Now I have to recast again because I got a higher tier of gear. So that's why I'm saying in the early game, until you unlock Icicle Gear, be somewhat less gung-ho about blowing all your raw materials. Try to save up as much as you can without limiting your progression, and then that's the way you approach it. And then the stats you're aiming for in all the gear is based on your class. Obviously, if you're a tank, you might want to throw in some defensive stats on the mixed pieces like Greaves and Necklace and Helmet. So you'd have partially defensive, partially offensive stats. Some good stats to aim for are, for example, Endurance on the defensive pieces and HP. Very good. Endurance is a very powerful damage reduction skill stat, sorry. But ultimately, you're recasting for the purpose of achieving the best stats layout, which would be crit and determination as close to 35% as possible, accuracy to 103% in pre-class change and 106% in class change 1. So obviously I'm lacking about 3.1% here. I need to actually investigate and find out where I'm losing accuracy and try to correct that. Then after you have your crit and determination and accuracy set appropriately, then you'll start getting more attack, haste, mastery, more crit damage, and so on and so forth. So all the stuff you do in the game, whether it's Mulliman moves, whether it's recasting, it is all tools for you to generate stats in order to achieve these ideal stat values. So that's basically how you approach that. Now, I have made a separate video explaining what every stat does. You can find it on my channel called A Complete Guide to In-Game Stats. So I won't go into super great detail about all these stats. All I will say is the most important stats you can get from your, at least your offensive gear is, for example, the crit rate, determination, mastery, haste, and of course attack. So your stats priority on DPS should be endurance over HP, then defense, tenacity, block, evasion. Tanks, you should be prioritizing the same sort of defense, endurance, block, and so on. And then healers as well, following a similar priority as the DPS. So I think that's basically it. I mean, I would say that's a good summation of the recasting system, how it works, how you should approach it. Don't blow all your raw materials early game. Try to save some for class change 1. As you progress further and further, you will, obviously, like I said, as you're going longer times in between unlocking new rifts, you will have longer and longer time to amass raw materials as time passes. Now, unfortunately, the cost to recast does increase depending on the level of the gear you have. So just keep that in mind. It's going to get progressively more expensive to recast. So that kind of sucks. But yeah, that's basically the recasting system in a nutshell. If you feel like there's something I didn't explain fully and you'd like to know, leave it in the comments down below. Otherwise, if you like the video, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you have not already, and hit the notification bell so you know when the next video is uploaded. And join the Discord if you haven't already. It's a lot of fun to be there. We have tons of events, lots of activity in there, plenty of go-go gamers ready to help you out with your questions. So hope to see you there. Thanks for watching, everyone. Hope you found this video helpful, and I'll see you in the next one.